He was a man who had never begged. Dominic Corsetti ruled the East Coast with blood-cold precision. Judges, politicians, enemies everyone bowed or disappeared. Fear was the only language he ever needed. Until one night, in a filthy alley no one remembered by daylight, the devil was forced to kneel, not before a rival, not before a gun, but before a woman in a torn jacket, shaking from the cold, with $8 in her bank account and a dying child in her arms. When Dominic saw his daughter's lips turning blue, the world he built with violence cracked open. And when the little girl whispered a single word, Papa, the most feared man on the East Coast felt something far more terrifying than death: helplessness. Because his daughter would not open her eyes for the doctors. She would not respond to the machines. She would only breathe, when that broken waitress stayed beside her. And as Dominic stared at the woman who had accidentally become his child's lifeline, one terrifying thought settled in his mind. If she walked away, his daughter would die. If she stayed, everything he ruled would change forever. Elena would later replay that night in fragments rather than scenes, not as a clear sequence of events, but as sensations that refused to fade: the bite of October wind through fabric too thin to matter, the sour smell of damp concrete in the alley, the weight of exhaustion sinking into her bones after a 17-hour shift. And above all, the phone small, cracked, impossibly heavy resting in her trembling hand. At first, she thought she was hallucinating. People like her learned to distrust their senses when they were tired enough. The city was full of sounds that mimicked Nita cat crying, a drunk laughing too hard, the wind forcing its way through broken glass. Survival meant walking past all of it. Survival meant never stopping. But the sound she heard was wrong. Too weak. Too small. Elena slowed despite herself, heart tightening with a familiar dread. Every instinct screamed at her to keep moving, to pretend she had heard nothing. In this neighborhood, curiosity wasn't innocence, it was a liability. Women who stopped to help didn't make it home. Women who asked questions disappeared. Still, she turned. The alley was narrow, barely lit by a flickering street lamp that buzzed like an insect on its last breath. At first, she saw only shadows. Then her eyes adjusted, and the shape on the ground came into focus. A child. Too still. Too pale. Elena dropped to her knees without thinking, the cold concrete seeping through her jeans. The girl couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. Golden hair spread across the filth like something fragile that didn't belong there. Her dress white, expensive, ruined, stood out against the grime as sharply as blood on snow. "Elena," she whispered to herself, grounding her breath. "Stay calm." She placed 2 fingers against the child's neck. A pulse answered, faint and irregular. Alive, but barely. The girl's lips were tinged blue, her skin clammy beneath Elena's touch. This wasn't a scraped knee or a twisted ankle. This was something that carried consequences. Elena reached for her phone, already knowing what she should do. Call an ambulance, call the police, hand responsibility to someone else, and disappear before questions were asked. Then the child stirred. Silver gray eyes fluttered open, unfocused but searching, and locked onto Elena as if she were the only thing left in the world. The girl's fingers twitched, then curled weakly around the fabric of Elena's sleeve. "Papa?" The child breathed, voice barely louder than air. "I'm cold." Something inside Elena cracked. She had been that child once alone, frightened, calling for someone who never came. The memory rose uninvited, sharp enough to steal her breath. She swallowed hard, forcing herself back into the present. "It's okay," she whispered, though she had no idea if it was a lie. "I'm here." That was when she noticed the phone. It was tucked into a small pocket sewn into the child's dress, the kind of careful detail that spoke of wealth and protection Elena had never known. The screen was cracked, but when it lit up, it worked. Elena hesitated only a second before unlocking the emergency interface. There was one contact, no photo, no last name, just a single word. Papa. 10 digits beneath it. Clean, unadorned, final. Elena's throat tightened. She had sworn, long ago, never to involve herself in other people's lives. Promises were easy to make when you had nothing to lose. They were harder to keep when someone's breath was fading beneath your hands. She pressed call. The line rang once, twice. On the 3rd ring, it connected. Yes, the man's voice was low, controlled, stripped of warmth. Not irritated, not afraid, just dangerous. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. "Sir," she said quickly, before courage could abandon her, "please don't hang up. I found a child. I think she's your daughter. She collapsed near the bus stop on Maple Street." Silence. Not the kind filled with confusion or disbelief. The kind that sharpened the air. Describe her, the voice said. Elena did. The hair, the dress, the eyes. When she mentioned the silver bracelet engraved with a black rose, the man inhaled once, slow and controlled. Stay where you are, he said. Do not move. The line went dead. Elena stared at the phone, pulse roaring in her ears. She had expected questions, instructions, threats. What she hadn't expected was how final that silence felt, like a door slamming shut behind her. Minutes passed, or seconds. Time lost its shape. Then the city changed. The distant hum of traffic warped into something louder, angrier. Engines howled through the streets with no regard for lights or laws. Tires screamed. Somewhere nearby, a car horn blared in protest and was abruptly drowned out. Elena looked up just as 3 black SUVs skidded to a stop at the mouth of the alley, headlights flooding the darkness with blinding white light. Doors opened in unison. Men stepped out, dressed in tailored black suits that moved with military precision. They didn't shout. They didn't rush. They hunted. Elena's body went cold. Every rumor she had ever heard about men like these, the kind you didn't see unless something had gone terribly wrong, came rushing back. And then he appeared. The man who stepped out of the center vehicle didn't hurry. He didn't need to. The alley seemed to bend around him, the air thickening with each measured step. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair threaded with silver at the temples. A faint scar cut down the side of his face, a reminder of violence survived rather than avoided. When his eyes lifted to Elena, they were steel gray and merciless. In that instant, she understood the truth with chilling clarity. She hadn't called the police. She hadn't called help. She had called power. But the real shock didn't come from him. It came when the child in her arms stirred again. Small fingers tightened around Elena's sleeve with surprising strength. The girl leaned forward just enough to press her forehead against Elena's chest, breath uneven but determined. Don't let them take me, she whispered, eyes half closed. Not without you. The words hit harder than any threat. The man stopped, for the first time since he arrived. Something flickered across his face. Not anger, not suspicion, but fear, raw and unguarded. He dropped to his knees in front of them, the suit he wore meeting the filth of the alley without hesitation. Elena, he said, reading her name from the tag still pinned crookedly to her uniform. His voice was different now, lower, fractured. Look at me. She did. Please, he continued, hands trembling as they hovered over his daughter, unsure where to touch. Don't let go of her. Stay. Just for now. Elena realized then that whatever line she had crossed, there was no turning back. And as the child breathed a little easier against her heart, she understood one terrifying truth. Saving a life was easy. Living with the consequences would be much harder. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. The alley no longer felt like part of the city. It had become a sealed world, cut off by black suits and quiet orders murmured into hidden earpieces. No sirens, no flashing lights, just control absolute and unquestioned. Dominic Corsetti stayed on his knees. The men around him noticed. Elena saw it in the subtle tightening of their shoulders, the way their eyes flickered to one another before snapping back to stillness. This was not a sight they were meant to witness. The man who ruled them did not kneel. He did not hesitate. He did not ask. Yet here he was, his hands hovering over his daughter as though he were afraid to break her simply by touching her. Lily, he whispered again, softer now, almost reverent. Papa's here. The child's breathing stuttered, shallow and uneven, but her fingers remained locked in Elena's sleeve. She did not reach for her father. She did not look at him. Her body pressed closer to the woman who had found her in the dark, as if instinct had already chosen where safety lived. Dominic noticed. His gaze lifted slowly from his daughter to Elena, sharp and assessing. But there was something beneath it now, something dangerous in a way Elena had never encountered before. It was not rage. It was fear. She won't let go of you, he said quietly. Elena swallowed. Her throat felt dry, tight. She's scared. So am I, he replied, without irony. That admission hung between them, heavy as a loaded gun. One of the men stepped forward, tall, broad. His expression was carved from discipline. Boss, we need to move. Her pulse is unstable. Vaughn is standing by. Dominic didn't look away from Elena. Bring the car closer. The man hesitated, a fraction of a second, then nodded and barked orders. The SUVs shifted, engines humming low, precise, obedient. Dominic turned back to Elena. "You're coming with us." It wasn't phrased as a command. It was worse. It was stated as fact. Elena's heart began to race. I just found her. I don't know anything I know," he interrupted. "That's why you're coming." The logic was chilling in its simplicity. Two men moved to either side of her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat of their presence. Elena tightened her arms instinctively around Lily. "She won't go without me," Elena said before she could stop herself. The men froze. Dominic studied her for a long moment. The streetlight caught the silver at his temples, the scar on his cheek. He looked like a man carved from consequence. Every line in his face spoke of decisions made without regret. "Then you'll stay," he said. "Not with them. With her." Lily was lifted carefully, transferred into Dominic's arms, with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone like him. Elena's hands lingered in the empty space where the child had been, cold settling in their place. As Dominic carried Lily toward the vehicle, he paused, turned back. "You," he said, pointing at Elena. "Don't disappear." The doors opened. Leather seats, warmth, a different world entirely. Inside the SUV, Elena sat rigid, her hands clenched in her lap as the city blurred past the tinted windows. Lily lay across Dominic's chest, her small body rising and falling with effort. He barely blinked, his gaze fixed on her face, as if looking away might cost him everything. No one spoke. Elena became acutely aware of the difference between their lives. The softness of the leather beneath her fingers, the faint scent of expensive cologne, the silence protected, insulated, untouchable. This was not luxury. This was power. The vehicle slowed only once, passing through iron gates that opened without question. The estate beyond them was vast and dimly lit, its shadows carefully curated rather than neglected. Inside, everything moved quickly. Doctors appeared as if summoned by thought alone. Orders were given. Equipment rolled in. Lily was taken from Dominic's arms, and for a moment, something wild flashed in his eyes, as though he might refuse to let go. "Save her," he said, his voice low and lethal, no matter what it costs. Elena stood against the wall, forgotten and observed at the same time. She felt eyes on her guards, staff, men who had killed and would kill again without losing sleep. To them, she was an anomaly, a variable, and variables were dangerous. Hours blurred. Lily was stabilized but not safe. The words echoed in Elena's mind like a warning she didn't know how to interpret. Dominic finally turned to her then, up close. He was more terrifying, not because of his size or his reputation, but because of the restraint he wore like a second skin. He looked at her the way men looked at problems that could not be solved with force. "You have a name," he said. "Elena. You found my daughter. You didn't run." "I almost did." "But you didn't." Silence stretched between them again. "She trusts you," Dominic said finally. "That makes you valuable." Elena felt a chill run through her. "I don't want to be valuable." A corner of his mouth twitched, not a smile, but something close to it. "No one in my world ever does." He stepped closer, not threatening, not gentle, simply unavoidable. "You will stay here," he said, "until she wakes, until I know why she collapsed, until I know whether you are a coincidence or something else. And if I say no," Dominic met her gaze, steady and unyielding, "then I will still keep you safe." It sounded like a promise. It sounded like a warning. As he turned away, Elena realized the truth settling deep in her bones. She had not been rescued from the alley. She had been relocated. And somewhere behind glass and machines, a little girl slept, breathing because Elena had stayed. Whatever happened next, Elena understood one thing with frightening clarity. She was no longer invisible. Morning arrived without sunlight. Elena realized it when she opened her eyes and found the ceiling above her smooth, pale, unfamiliar. No peeling paint, no water stains shaped like continents, no sirens bleeding through cracked windows. For one disorienting second, she thought she had died. Then she remembered the alley, the child, the man who had knelt. She sat up slowly, muscles aching as if she had slept in armor. The room was large, restrained in its elegance, furnished with the kind of quiet luxury that didn't beg to be admired. Heavy curtains blocked the outside world. A single door stood opposite the bed, closed, locked. The thought settled coldly in her chest. Not panic, not yet, just understanding. Elena swung her legs off the bed. The floor was warm beneath her bare feet. Someone had removed her shoes. Someone had decided she wasn't going anywhere. A soft knock came at the door before it opened. A woman entered, middle-aged, composed, carrying a tray, tea, toast, a bowl of fruit cut with meticulous care. "You should eat," the woman said gently. "You'll need your strength." For what Elena asked. The woman's expression didn't change, but her eyes flicked briefly toward the hallway before returning. For today, that was the only answer she received. Lily remained unconscious through the morning, her condition described in careful, controlled language that offered neither hope nor despair. Stable, monitored, observed. Every word felt like it was placed deliberately, as if truth itself had become negotiable. Elena was escorted through corridors that echoed with quiet efficiency. Men nodded to one another without speaking. Doors opened and closed without hesitation. Everything here obeyed an unseen order, a rhythm Elena could sense but not yet understand. She was led into a room that felt colder than the rest. No windows. A long table. 2 chairs. Dominic Corsetti waited. He stood when she entered not as courtesy, but as assessment. His eyes traced her face, her posture, the way she held herself when she thought no one was watching. "You slept," he said. "A little." "That's good." Elena took the chair opposite him, folding her hands together to hide their tremor. "Is Lily awake?" "No." The word landed heavily. Dominic didn't soften it. He didn't explain. He didn't apologize. Silence pressed down on the room until Elena felt compelled to fill it. "You said I would be safe. You are... That's not the same as being free." Dominic tilted his head slightly. "Considering... In my world, freedom is relative." He leaned back, fingers steepled. "Tell me again what you did last night." Elena did. She told the truth because she didn't know what else would keep her alive. She described the sound that made her stop. The pulse beneath her fingers. The phone. The choice. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't ask for mercy. When she finished, Dominic studied her as though her words were pieces of a larger puzzle. "You didn't call emergency services. I thought about it. But you didn't." "No." Why Elena met his gaze? "Because I saw the bracelet." Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Calculation. "You knew what it meant." "Yes." "And you still called me." "Yes." Dominic's mouth curved into something that was not quite a smile. That makes you either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both. The answer surprised him. That much was clear. He watched her more intently now. Before he could respond, the door opened again. A man entered tall, sharp-eyed, carrying a tablet. He placed it on the table and stepped back. "Security footage," the man said. "From the service roads." Dominic gestured for Elena to watch. The screen came alive with grainy video. A laundry truck. A gate. A moment of inattention. A small figure slipping out unseen. "Lily." Elena's chest tightened. "She ran away. She escaped," Dominic corrected. "From people paid to ensure she never could." Elena felt something shift. This wasn't just an accident. It wasn't negligence. This wasn't random, she said quietly. "No," Dominic agreed. "It wasn't." He turned the tablet off. Someone wanted her unguarded. And someone failed. "Several someones," he said. "They are being dealt with." The way he said it made Elena's skin prickle. She believed him without question. Dominic stood, circling the table slowly. "You heard nothing else in the alley? No voices? No vehicles? No? You didn't see anyone following you? No." He stopped behind her. Not close enough to touch. Close enough to be felt. "You understand why I have to ask," he said. "Yes." "You understand why you can't leave?" "Yes." He paused. Then, unexpectedly, he said, "You understand why some of my people think you are involved." Elena turned in her chair, forcing herself to face him. "I'm not..." "I know," Dominic said. The certainty in his voice startled her. "But they don't," he continued. "And belief is often more dangerous than truth." As if summoned by his words, a sound cut through the room sharp, high, breaking. A cry. Lily's voice. Elena was on her feet before she realized she had moved. Dominic reacted at the same time, already striding toward the door. They reached Lily's room together. The child's eyes were open now, glassy with pain and confusion. Machines hummed softly around her. The moment she saw Elena, her breathing steadied, her fingers reaching out. "Elena," she whispered. Elena took her hand without thinking. Dominic watched the monitor, then his daughter, then Elena. Something shifted behind his eyes, slow and irreversible. Later, when Lily drifted back into sleep, Dominic stood beside the bed in silence. "She responds to you," he said. Elena nodded. She feels safe. Dominic exhaled slowly. Then you will stay closer to her. For how long? For as long as she needs you. And after that, he looked at her then, really looked at her, as though measuring the weight of a decision that could not be undone. After that, he said, we will see how much you know. The words were calm, almost gentle. They terrified her anyway. As Dominic turned away, Elena understood the truth she hadn't wanted to name. Saving Lily had brought her inside these walls. Knowing the truth might keep her here forever. Time inside the estate moved differently. Hours passed without clocks. Days were measured not by sunlight or darkness, but by Lily's breathing, by the rise and fall of her small chest, by the numbers flickering across monitors that never slept. Elena learned this rhythm quickly. She learned which machines could be ignored and which demanded attention, which nurses spoke in reassurance and which spoke in warnings wrapped with politeness. She learned the soft sound Lily made when pain stirred her from sleep, and the even softer one when comfort finally reached her. Most of all, she learned where she was meant to stand. At Lily's bedside. Dominic did not order it. He did not need to. Every time Elena tried to step away just for air, just for a moment, Lily's pulse wavered, her fingers twitching as if searching for something lost. The doctors noticed. The nurses whispered. Data didn't lie. Neither did instinct. She stabilizes when Elena is present, one physician said carefully, as if aware the words might alter more than treatment plans. Her stress response decreases. Dominic listened without expression. But when Elena returned to the room and Lily's breathing evened within seconds, something settled behind his eyes, quiet, heavy, irrevocable. Elena became a constant. She slept on a chair pulled close to the bed, waking at the slightest change in Lily's breath. She learned to feed her ice chips, to tell stories Lily barely had the strength to hear, stories about ordinary things, bus rides, stray cats, warm kitchens she wished existed. Lily listened with wide eyes, as though these small, unremarkable details were treasures. Was it scary? Lily asked once, her voice thin but curious. The alley, Elena replied gently. Lily nodded. Yes, Elena admitted. But you were braver than you think. Lily considered that, then smiled faintly. I wasn't alone. The words lingered long after the child fell asleep again. Dominic watched these moments from the doorway more often than Elena realized. He said little. When he did speak, it was never unnecessary. You don't look afraid anymore. He observed one evening. Elena didn't turn. I am. But you stay. Yes. Why? Elena paused, her fingers brushing Lily's hair. Because someone should. Dominic absorbed that quietly. He had been surrounded by loyalty his entire life, bought, enforced, inherited. This was different. This wasn't obligation. It wasn't fear. It unsettled him. The estate adapted to Elena's presence without comment. A room was assigned to her near Lily's. Clothes appeared in her size. Meals were prepared she often forgot to eat. Security followed her steps with respectful distance, eyes sharp, judgment suspended but not removed. She felt it constantly, the weight of being observed, evaluated, discussed in rooms she would never enter. Not everyone approved. She sensed it in the stiffness of certain guards, the glances that lingered too long, in the silence that fell when she entered a room unexpectedly. She was not one of them. Worse, she was something new, unpredictable. The tension surfaced quietly one night when Lily spiked a fever. Doctors rushed in, orders overlapped. Elena was gently but firmly guided toward the door. Lily cried out as soon as Elena's hand slipped from hers. No, Lily protested weakly. Elena stays. It's just for a moment, the nurse insisted. Lily shook her head, panic flooding her eyes. The monitors reacted instantly. Dominic stepped forward. She stays, he said. The room froze. No one argued. Elena remained by the bed as the fever broke slowly, sweat dampening Lily's hair, fear receding inch by inch. When it was over, Dominic didn't leave. He stood beside Elena, his presence silent but absolute. Later, when the room emptied, he spoke again. You realize what this means? Elena nodded. I do. My enemies will see you. I already know. And they will use you. Elena met his gaze. They already could. A faint smile touched his lips. Not amusement. Respect. Days passed. Lily grew stronger. Her laughter returned in fragile pieces, each one precious. She asked for Elena constantly, about her life, her favorite color, her childhood. You don't talk about your family, Lily said once. I don't have one, Elena replied gently, Lily frowned. Then, with the simple certainty only children possessed, she said, "You do now." The words struck Elena harder than any threat ever could. That night, Dominic summoned her to his study. The room smelled of old wood and quiet authority. He didn't offer her a seat. "I can give you a way out," he said. "Money, protection, a new identity." Elena listened without interruption. "You would leave before things become dangerous," he continued. "Before choices are made for you." "And Lily?" Elena asked. Dominic didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was controlled but raw beneath the surface. She would recover. "That's not what I asked." Silence stretched between them. Elena understood then. This was not an offer. It was a test. "She chose me," Elena said quietly. "I didn't choose this world. But I won't abandon her because it's inconvenient." Dominic studied her for a long moment. Finally, he nodded once. "Then you will remain here," he said, "under my protection. And your rules." Yes, Elena accepted without illusion. Protection in Dominic Corsetti's world came at a cost. It always did. As she returned to Lily's room, she felt the shift settle fully into place. The estate no longer treated her as a guest or a liability. She was something else now, a bond. And as Lily slept peacefully, her hand curled around Elena's finger, one truth became impossible to deny. In a world ruled by power and fear, the smallest voice had made the strongest choice. And Dominic Corsetti would move heaven, hell, and every enemy in between to honor it. By the time Lily could sit up on her own, the estate had learned Elena's footsteps. Doors opened faster when she approached. Conversations softened, then stopped. She felt it everywhere, the subtle recalibration of a world adjusting to an outsider who no longer fit the category of temporary. What unsettled her most was not the attention, but the quiet certainty that something was wrong. It began with small things, a missed dosage corrected too quickly, a nurse hesitating before answering a simple question, a doctor's reassurance that felt overly rehearsed. Elena noticed because she had learned to read danger long before she ever learned to trust kindness. The first time Lily complained of dizziness, it passed within minutes. The second time, Elena felt the child's hand go clammy in hers, her pulse fluttering in a way that made Elena's chest tighten. "It's nothing," the nurse said gently. "Side effects." Elena smiled politely and said nothing. But that night, she didn't sleep. She watched the monitors, listened to Lily's breathing, counted the seconds between each rise and fall of her chest. When Lily finally drifted into a deeper sleep, Elena slipped quietly into the corridor and followed instinct rather than permission. The medical wing was quiet, lit by a pale glow that made everything feel suspended in time. Elena scanned charts she was not meant to read, labels she did not fully understand. Her eyes stopped on one word repeated twice where it shouldn't have been. Allergen. Her heart began to pound. Elena had asked about Lily's allergies on the first day. It had been dismissed as precautionary, but now the medication list told a different story, one that suggested not ignorance, but negligence. Or worse. She straightened as footsteps approached. Dominic appeared at the end of the corridor, jacket unbuttoned, expression unreadable. He took in the chart in her hands, the tension in her shoulders, the way she stood as though bracing for impact. "You found something," he said. Elena didn't soften it. "She's been given medication she reacts to." The air around him changed. Not explosively. Precisely. "How certain are you? Enough to wake you instead of the doctors." Dominic took the chart, eyes moving quickly. When he looked up again, the man Elena saw was not the father kneeling in an alley. He was the one people feared. Who approved this, he asked. Elena shook her head. "I don't know. But it wasn't a mistake." Silence followed, not empty, but charged. Dominic handed the chart back to her, then gestured toward Lily's room. "Stay with her," he said. "Don't let anyone touch her until I return." "What are you going to do?" "Find the truth." He turned away without another word. Elena returned to Lily, her heart racing. She sat by the bed, brushing the child's hair back gently. Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Elena," she murmured. "I'm here," Elena whispered. "You're safe." Lily frowned slightly. "Papa's angry." Elena paused. Children sensed more than adults liked to admit. "Papa's just making sure everything is okay." Lily seemed to accept that, drifting back to sleep with a soft sigh. Hours later, Dominic returned. His suit was immaculate. His expression was not, "They won't do it again," he said simply. Elena didn't ask how. She already knew. What happens now, she asked. Dominic studied her, something unreadable in his gaze. Now we find out who thought they could touch what's mine. The next days unfolded under a veneer of normalcy that fooled no one. Lily improved steadily once the medication was corrected. Her strength returned in cautious increments. Her laughter still fragile but real. Elena felt eyes on her more sharply now. The suspicion had shifted. It no longer asked whether she was involved. It asked whether she was dangerous. One evening, as Lily slept peacefully, Elena found Dominic alone in the study. He stood by the window, city lights reflecting faintly in the glass. "You were right," he said without turning. "It wasn't an accident." Elena joined him slowly. "Who?" He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was measured. "Someone who believed my attention was divided, and they wanted to remind you of your priorities?" "Yes." Elena folded her arms, tension creeping into her posture. "What does that make me?" Dominic turned to face her. "A variable." The word was neither insult nor praise. It was worse. "In my world," he continued, "variables are eliminated." Elena met his gaze without flinching. "And yet I'm still here." "Yes," he said, "because Lily chose you." The admission hung between them. "You understand the risk now," Dominic said quietly. "Staying here puts a target on you." Elena nodded. "Leaving would too." A corner of his mouth curved slightly. "You learn quickly." Later that night, Elena stood alone in the corridor, listening to the estate breathe. She realized something then, something she hadn't wanted to name. The enemy wasn't someone lurking in the shadows with a gun. It was someone who wore a badge, a smile, someone who could harm without raising suspicion. And Elena, by noticing, by speaking, by staying, had crossed an invisible line. She was no longer just the woman Lily trusted. She was the reason someone had failed. And in Dominic Corsetti's world, failure never went unanswered. As she returned to Lily's room and took her place at the bedside, Elena felt the weight of that truth settle fully into her bones. Love had brought her here, but survival would demand far more than love alone. The offer came at dawn. Elena was sitting beside Lily's bed, watching sunlight filter through the sheer curtains, when a soft knock sounded at the door. She already knew who it would be. Dominic never appeared unannounced when a decision had been made. He believed in preparation, even for endings. "Come with me," he said quietly. He led her through corridors she had learned by heart, past doors she had learned not to ask about, into a smaller study tucked away from the main wing. A single envelope lay on the desk. Thick, heavy, final. "This is your exit," Dominic said. "New name, new location. Enough money to live without looking back." Elena stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. "You leave tonight," he continued, "before anyone realizes you're more than a passing presence." "And Lily?" Elena asked. Dominic's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "She's stronger now. The doctors are confident. That's not what I asked." Silence stretched, taut and deliberate. Dominic finally turned to the window, his reflection fractured by the glass. "She will forget." The words struck harder than Elena expected. "She won't," Elena said softly. "And neither will I." Dominic faced her again, steel gray eyes sharp. "This is not a request. Elena, this is protection. For me," she said, "not for her." He studied her, weighing the cost of argument against the cost of honesty. "If you stay, you become leverage. People will use you to reach her. To reach me, I already am," Elena replied. "The difference is whether I'm here to see it coming." Dominic's gaze lingered on her face, as though searching for something: fear, hesitation, regret. He found none, only resolve. "You don't understand what you're choosing," he said quietly. "I understand exactly," Elena replied. "I'm choosing something that isn't safe." The door opened before Dominic could respond. Lily stood there, small and unsteady but upright, one hand braced against the frame. "Papa," she said. "Why is Elena leaving?" The question cut through the room like a blade. Dominic turned sharply. "Lily, you shouldn't be out of bed." She ignored him, eyes fixed on Elena. "You promised you wouldn't go." Elena crossed the room in 3 steps, kneeling in front of her. "I didn't promise," she said gently. "I said I'd stay as long as you needed me." Lily's lower lip trembled. "I still need you." Dominic closed his eyes briefly. As though absorbing a blow, Elena looked up at him. This is her choice too. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lily reached out, grasping Elena's hand with both of hers, small fingers fierce in their determination. "If she goes, Lily said, voice shaking but clear. I won't eat, I won't sleep, I won't talk to the doctors. Every man in the hallway froze. This was not manipulation. This was a child stating a truth she believed would protect her. Dominic knelt in front of his daughter, placing his hands over hers. Lily, he said softly, listen to me. She shook her head. You always tell me not to be scared. But I am. He swallowed. I know. She makes it better. The silence that followed was not empty. It was decisive. Dominic stood slowly. He looked at Elena not as a liability, not as a risk, but as something far more dangerous. A commitment. You stay, he said. But everything changes. Elena nodded. I expected that. From this moment on. Dominic continued. You do not move without security. You do not speak to anyone outside this estate without clearance. You do not make yourself visible unless I know where you are. And Lily? Elena asked. She stays with you, he said. As much as possible? Lily smiled, relief washing over her features. She leaned into Elena, small arms wrapping around her waist. Later that night, Elena lay awake in her assigned room, the envelope untouched on the desk across from her. The weight of her choice pressed down on her chest, not with regret, but with clarity. She had been offered freedom. She had refused it. Down the hall, Dominic stood alone in the study, staring at the city beyond the glass. He understood something now that unsettled him more than any enemy ever had. Elena was not staying because she owed him. She was staying because she chose to, and choice, in his world, carried consequences he could not fully control. As he turned off the lights, one thought anchored itself firmly in his mind. If harm came to her, it would not be an accident. It would be a declaration of war. The first thing Elena noticed was the silence. Not the guarded quiet of the estate, but something subtler, the absence of tension in Lily's breathing as she slept. For the first time since the alley, the child rested without flinching, her small hand loose against the sheets instead of clutched in fear. Elena sat beside the bed, watching that simple miracle with a reverence she didn't dare name. Life settled into a fragile rhythm. Mornings were for lessons disguised as games, afternoons for slow walks through the inner gardens where walls were high and exits few. Lily laughed there, chasing butterflies that never strayed beyond the hedges. Elena laughed too, surprised each time by how natural it felt. Dominic watched from a distance. He never interrupted. He never hovered. Yet he was always there on the terrace, in the shadow of an archway, standing still with the patience of a man who trusted nothing he could not see. Elena felt his presence like a steady weight at her back. Not threatening, not comforting, simply unavoidable. It changed her. She stopped flinching when doors closed behind her. She learned the cadence of the guard's steps, the subtle shifts that signaled danger or safety. She learned Dominic's silences too, how some meant restraint, others calculation, and a rare few uncertainty. That was the one that unsettled her most. It appeared one evening as they stood together in the conservatory, watching rain slide down the glass. Lily had fallen asleep in Elena's arms, her head tucked beneath Elena's chin, warm and trusting. She's attached, Dominic said quietly. Elena didn't pretend otherwise. So are you. He turned to her, eyes narrowing slightly. Don't mistake responsibility for weakness. I won't, she replied. But I won't confuse fear with control either. For a moment, she thought he might bristle. Instead, he exhaled slowly. You speak to me as if you're not afraid. I am, Elena said. I just don't let it decide everything anymore. Dominic studied her, his gaze lingering with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. There was no hunger in it, no threat, only curiosity sharpened by caution. You're changing the balance, he said. So are you, she answered. The words lingered between them, unspoken implications threading through the air. Later that night, Elena learned what balance truly meant. It happened without warning. No alarms, no raised voices, just a sudden stillness that prickled the skin. The guards shifted positions. The estate seemed to inhale, bracing. Dominic appeared at Elena's door minutes later. We have a problem. He didn't explain further. He didn't need to. Elena followed him down corridors lit dimmer than usual. Lily carried safely in Dominic's arms. They stopped before a room Elena had never entered. Inside, a man knelt on the floor, hands bound, face bloodied but defiant. He was one of ours, Dominic said. He still is, depending on how honest he chooses to be. The man's eyes flicked to Elena, then to Lily. Something like regret crossed his face, quickly smothered. I didn't touch the kid, he said. I swear. I know, Dominic replied calmly. You just told someone where she would be. The man's jaw clenched. I didn't think... No. Dominic said, You didn't... Elena felt Lily stir. She shifted the child slightly, shielding her face. Dominic noticed and stepped back, his body instinctively positioning itself between Lily and the man. That was when Elena understood. Dominic Corsetti did not merely command loyalty. He enforced distance. He kept his world divided into compartments of control. And Lily and Elena were no longer in those compartments. They were above them. The man was removed swiftly, quietly. Elena never asked where he was taken. Dominic never offered. When it was over, Dominic stood alone in the hallway, his shoulders rigid, his control stretched thin. You didn't have to bring me, Elena said softly. Yes, he replied. I did. She waited. If you are going to stay, he continued, you need to understand the cost of trust. And you, Elena asked, do you understand the cost of not having it? His eyes met hers, something unguarded flickering there. I'm learning. Days later, Dominic was wounded, not by a blade or a bullet, but by news delivered in low voices behind closed doors. Elena didn't know the details. She only knew the tension that followed him like a shadow, the way his hands curled slightly as if resisting the urge to strike. That night, Lily woke crying. Elena reached her first, lifting her gently, murmuring reassurances. Lily's tears slowed, but she didn't settle until Elena carried her down the hall toward the study. Dominic stood inside, staring at a map spread across the desk. He looked up, startled, when they entered. Papa, Lily said sleepily. You're sad. He knelt immediately, drawing her into his arms. I'm fine. Lily studied his face with solemn concentration. You lie when you're sad. Elena looked away, giving them privacy. But Dominic's gaze followed her, something shifting in his expression. When Lily fell asleep again, Dominic spoke quietly. She trusts you more than anyone. Elena met his gaze. She trusts you too. You just don't always trust yourself. He considered that. Then, unexpectedly, he said, Stay. I already am. No, he corrected. Stay with me. The words were not a confession. They were not a promise. They were a boundary redrawn. Elena felt her heart stutter, fear and warmth colliding in equal measure. I won't cross lines I can't survive. Dominic nodded. Neither will I. It was not romance. Not yet. But it was something rarer in his world. The beginning of trust. The first gunshot shattered the illusion. It echoed through the estate just before dawn, sharp and unmistakable, cutting through the careful quiet Dominic had built around Lily and Elena. Elena woke instantly, heart pounding, her body already moving before fear could catch up. She reached Lily's room in seconds, scooping the child into her arms as alarms finally began to wail. Papa, Lily whispered, eyes wide. I'm here, Elena said, forcing calm into her voice. Stay with me. Footsteps thundered in the corridor. Orders barked in low, urgent tones. The estate, so controlled and elegant by day, transformed into something primal, alive with threat. Dominic appeared at the doorway, gun already in hand, his expression stripped of every softness Elena had learned to recognize. They breached the outer gate. He said, This ends now. He took Lily from Elena gently but firmly, passing her to a guard who had never once failed to earn his trust. Then he turned back to Elena, his eyes locking onto hers with fierce intensity. You stay behind me, no matter what you hear, no matter what you see. Elena nodded, though every instinct screamed to argue. This was not her battlefield. And yet, the fear clawing at her chest was not for herself. It was for him. The gunfire moved closer. Shouts. The unmistakable sound of bodies hitting the ground. Elena pressed herself against the wall as Dominic moved forward with lethal precision, his presence commanding the chaos around him. This was the man the world feared, the man she had tried not to imagine in full. And now she saw him clearly. There was no hesitation in him, no doubt, only purpose sharpened by fury. He issued orders with ruthless clarity, directing his men like extensions of his own will. Blood stained the marble floors, vivid and obscene against the estate's polished calm. Elena's stomach twisted. She had known this world was violent, but knowing and witnessing were not the same. They reached the central hall just as the last intruder was dragged into view, bleeding, defiant, alive only because Dominic had ordered it so. The man spat blood onto the floor, laughing weakly. You got sloppy, he sneered, all because of a woman. The words hung in the air like poison. Dominic stepped closer, his voice dangerously soft. You came into my home. You changed. The man shot back. You got distracted. You let sentiment make you weak. Elena felt the accusation like a blow. She took an involuntary step forward. Dominic noticed. That was when everything changed. He raised his hand not to strike, but to stop her. A silent command. Stay back. And in that moment, Elena understood the truth with devastating clarity. This was the line he would never let her cross. Not because he didn't trust her, because he did. The man on the floor laughed again. Kill me, he taunted, or admit she's your weakness. Dominic looked at him for a long, terrible moment. Then he spoke, his voice steady, cold, final. You're wrong. He turned away. The shot came a second later, fired by one of his men, clean and efficient. The body collapsed. The laughter cut off mid-breath. Silence followed, thick and heavy. Elena's knees nearly gave out. Dominic walked toward her slowly, as if each step required effort. When he reached her, there was blood on his hands, not hers, not Lily's, but it might as well have been. This is what I am, he said quietly. What you saw tonight, that's the truth. Elena met his gaze, her chest tight, eyes burning. I know. You shouldn't, he said. No one should have to. She shook her head. Don't decide what I can survive for me. The words surprised them both. Dominic searched her face, expecting fear, disgust, retreat. What he found instead unsettled him more than gunfire ever could. Grief, not for the man who died, but for him. I didn't want you to see me like this, he said. Elena swallowed hard. I didn't want you to be alone in it. The tension between them shifted, raw and unguarded. For the first time, Dominic looked at her not as someone he needed to protect from his world, but as someone who had chosen to stand inside it. Later, after the estate was secured and Lily was sleeping safely again. Elena found Dominic alone in the study. He stood at the sink, scrubbing his hands over and over, as if blood could be erased by force of will. She stepped inside quietly. You don't have to do that, she said. He didn't look up. I do. She reached out, stopping his hands. The contact was brief, hesitant, electric. Dominic froze, then slowly allowed himself to still. Elena met his eyes in the reflection. You didn't lose yourself tonight. I embraced it. You protected your child, and endangered you. Elena shook her head. I was already in danger the moment I stayed. Silence settled between them, heavy with everything unsaid. When Dominic finally turned toward her, his voice was low, stripped of command. If you stay now, there's no pretending, no half measures. This world will mark you. Elena didn't hesitate. It already has. Something in his expression broke then, not visibly, not dramatically, but irrevocably. He stepped closer, resting his forehead briefly against hers, not touching anywhere else, as if testing a boundary he feared crossing. I will never forgive myself if you're hurt because of me, he said. Elena closed her eyes. Then don't let it be for nothing. Outside. Dawn finally arrived, pale and fragile, washing over a night soaked in violence. Elena understood now that love in this world would never be gentle. It would be forged in choices, sealed by blood, and guarded by trust sharp enough to cut. And Dominic Corsetti, for the first time in his life, was no longer fighting alone. After the blood was cleaned and the alarms silenced, the estate did not return to normal. It became quieter, not the fragile quiet of fear, but the heavy stillness that followed irreversible decisions. Dominic Corsetti understood that kind of silence better than anyone. It was the sound of a world rearranging itself around a new truth. Elena felt it too. She moved through the corridors differently now. Not watched as a guest, not guarded as a liability. People stepped aside for her, not out of obedience, but acknowledgement. She had stood where others would have broken. She had seen what most were never meant to see and stayed. Lily recovered quickly after that night. Her laughter returned, stronger, less tentative. She slept without nightmares, ate without coaxing, and began asking questions that carried a child's certainty rather than fear. Are we safe now? She asked one afternoon, swinging her legs from a chair too large for her. Dominic hesitated. Elena answered first. Safer than before? Lily nodded, satisfied. Because you're both here. The simplicity of it left no room for argument. That evening, Dominic asked Elena to walk with him through the inner garden. The air smelled of damp earth and night-blooming flowers. High walls enclosed them, shielding the space from the rest of the estate, from the world that still demanded blood and obedience. I'm dismantling parts of the organization, Dominic said without preamble. Elena stopped. That's dangerous. So is standing still. He turned to her, eyes steady. The people who moved against Lily did so because they believed my priorities had shifted. They were right. And you're letting them see it, Elena said. Yes, he replied. On my terms. She studied his face, searching for hesitation. There was none. Only resolve sharpened by something new, purpose that extended beyond survival. You're changing everything, she said softly. For her, he corrected. And because of you. The words settled heavily between them. I won't ask you to stay, Dominic continued. Not like this. Not without knowing exactly what it means. Elena felt her heart slow, each beat deliberate. Then tell me. He gestured to the walls, the lights beyond them. If you stay, there is no anonymity, no safe distance. You will be seen as mine. The possessiveness in the word was not threatening. It was protective. Claimed. And if I leave, she asked, I will make sure you disappear, he said honestly, cleanly, safely. Elena exhaled slowly. That's not really a choice. It's the only one I can offer without lying. She thought of the envelope still untouched in her room, of the night she could have walked away, of Lily's small hand gripping hers in the dark. Then I choose what's real, Elena said. Even if it's dangerous? Dominic nodded once. That's all I needed to hear. They stood in silence, the garden holding its breath around them. When Dominic reached for her, it wasn't with urgency or hunger. It was with care, as though he were afraid of what his touch might promise. Their hands met. It was not a kiss. It didn't need to be. The connection was quieter, deeper, charged with everything they had not yet allowed themselves to name. The next morning, Dominic gathered his inner circle. Elena wasn't asked to leave. The message was clear. This ends now, Dominic said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the room. No more divided loyalties, no more shadows within my walls. Eyes flicked toward Elena, then back to him. She stays, Dominic continued. And anyone who sees her as leverage sees me as the consequence. No one challenged him. Later. Elena found Lily in the library, surrounded by books she couldn't yet read but loved to touch. You didn't leave, Lily said. No, Elena replied, smiling. Lily considered this, then climbed into her lap. Does that mean you're staying forever? Elena looked up to find Dominic watching them from the doorway, something unguarded in his expression. I'm staying as long as you'll have me, Elena said. Lily beamed. Good, because Papa needs you. That night, Elena stood at the window of her room, city lights flickering like distant stars. Dominic joined her quietly, standing close without touching. You could still change your mind, he said. Elena shook her head. This is the last place I'd ever expect to belong. And yet, he said softly, you do. She turned to face him. I don't need promises. Neither do I, he replied. Only honesty. They stood there, side by side, knowing the path ahead would not be easy or clean. But it would be chosen. Together. In a world built on fear. They had crossed the point of no return. And neither of them wished to turn back. The world did not end when Dominic Corsetti changed it. It simply grew quieter. The newspapers spoke of restructuring, of businesses sold and territories abandoned. Rivals whispered about weakness, then fell silent when nothing came of it. Violence did not disappear. It never truly did, but it retreated, pulled back by intention rather than fear. Dominic no longer ruled by spreading shadows outward. He drew boundaries instead, firm and deliberate, choosing what would remain inside them. Elena watched this transformation without illusion. She understood better than anyone that redemption was not a single act, but a series of choices made every day. Dominic still carried the weight of his past. He did not deny it. He did not ask forgiveness for it. He simply refused to let it dictate Lily's future. And hers. Life inside the estate softened in small, meaningful ways. Lily attended lessons with tutors who spoke gently and laughed often. She planted flowers in the inner garden, insisting Elena help even when her hands grew dirty and sore. Dominic joined them sometimes, sleeves rolled up, awkward at first, then quietly attentive. Elena noticed how Lily watched him, how she waited for his approval without fear, how she reached for his hand without hesitation. It was not the bond of a child sheltered by lies. It was the bond of one protected by truth, shaped carefully and honestly. One afternoon, as Lily chased sunlight across the stone path, Dominic turned to Elena. She's different now. Elena smiled. She feels safe. So do you, he said. It wasn't a question. Elena considered the word carefully. Safe had once meant anonymity, invisibility, survival without expectation. Now it meant something else entirely. Presence, choice, being seen without being consumed. Yes, she said, I do. Their relationship unfolded without spectacle. No dramatic declarations. No promises whispered in the dark. They learned each other instead habits, silences, boundaries. Dominic learned when to speak and when to step back. Elena learned when his stillness meant thought rather than distance. They disagreed. They argued quietly, fiercely at times, but neither walked away. One evening, Dominic invited Elena to dinner in the smaller dining room, the one untouched by formality. Lily sat between them, swinging her legs, narrating her day with exaggerated seriousness. When dessert arrived, Lily leaned forward, eyes bright with conspiracy. Papa, she said, Elena should stay forever. Dominic raised an eyebrow. Forever is a long time. So is tomorrow, Lily replied confidently. And she's here for that. Elena laughed softly, startled by the sudden warmth behind her eyes. Dominic looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing the shape of a future he had once believed impossible. Later, after Lily was asleep, Dominic stood with Elena on the terrace overlooking the city. The air was cool, steady, alive with distant lights. I won't ask you to bind yourself to this world, he said quietly. Not with vows, not with chains. Elena met his gaze. I wouldn't accept them. A faint smile touched his lips. I know. He took her hand, his grip gentle but certain. Stay because you choose to. Every day, Elena squeezed his fingers. That's the only way I know how to stay. Below them, the city moved on unaware, indifferent, endless. For the first time in her life, Elena did not feel the need to run from it. Months passed. The estate no longer felt like a fortress. It became a home shaped by routine and laughter, by shared meals and quiet mornings. Elena took over parts of Lily's education, teaching her kindness without naivety, strength without cruelty. Dominic watched this with something close to wonder. One morning, Elena found a small box on her bedside table. No note, no pressure. Inside was a simple ring, not extravagant, not symbolic of power, but chosen with care. She carried it with her through the day, saying nothing. That night, as Lily slept curled between them during a storm, Elena finally spoke. I don't need a promise. Dominic brushed a strand of hair from her face. Neither do I. She placed the ring in his palm. But I choose this. He closed his hand around it, emotion flickering briefly across his carefully controlled expression. Not triumph, not relief, gratitude. They did not marry in a cathedral or before cameras. They chose a quiet ceremony in the garden Lily loved, attended only by those who mattered. No speeches, no applause, just a shared understanding that this was not an ending. It was continuity. As the sun dipped low, Lily ran between them, laughing, her joy unburdened and bright. Elena watched Dominic watch his daughter, and knew with certainty that love had not erased his darkness. It had given it a reason to stop spreading. That night, as the estate settled into peaceful silence, Elena stood at the window one last time. Dominic joined her, their shoulders touching easily. We're not perfect, she said. No, he agreed, but we're honest. She turned to him, resting her head against his shoulder. That's enough. In a world that once demanded she disappear to survive, Elena had found something rarer than safety. She had found a place where she was chosen, and where she chose to stay.